Hi, today we're joined by Claudia Offner, who previously was studying a master's in psychology and business at the University of Edinburgh, but between her third and fourth year, decided to participate in Climate KIC's InnoSpace summer school. Thank you for joining us today, Claudia. Could you tell us a little bit about the summer school and what it entailed? And yeah, what attracted you to the program?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I applied to the Climate KIC summer school back in 2018. I found myself in the end of my third year of my master's, and I realized I didn't have that much experience in industry, and I really wanted to get more experience related to climate-related issues. So I found Climate KIC. One of my professors mentioned it in my course, and I thought I would just apply. But funnily enough, I actually did an open application. And so Climate KIC does a number of different schools with different themes. And I essentially told them that I would be happy to do whichever themed school they thought I'd be best in. And when they got back to me, they said that they put me in the InnoSpace journey. And at first I was kind of like, whoa, not really sure what that entails, but I'm really glad I did it because I otherwise would have never learned anything about remote sensing or satellite data because it's just completely different from the field I was studying.
Was it were you happy? You kind of were happy with the selection, or was there one that you were kind of edging towards a little bit more? Were you happy with the InnoSpace kind of selection?
Yeah, I was happy, but I will admit I was quite intimidated by it at first. So I can't really remember what the other themes were, but I was very much taking it as an opportunity to be open and just to see where it would lead me. So for me, I was mostly concerned with climate change, and I wanted to learn as much about climate change and real world applications and solutions to combat issues related to the big issue that we're facing today. So I was quite open to it, and I'm very glad I actually ended up doing the InnoSpace one because it actually really changed my trajectory for my career.
So was it much of a challenge just to I don't know, you seem to be quite willing and accepting of a challenge, but how was it? So like previously you'd done like human behavior and psychology and mixed that with business, I suppose. But yeah, you really kind of had to embrace lots of different data sets and that sort of thing. I don't know, was it a challenge, or I don't know, was it you just excited just to try something a little bit new?
It was a massive challenge for me. I found myself, I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome when I got there because many of the people I was working with came from engineering backgrounds and environmental science backgrounds or data science or even geography and, fields that seemed related to space data and climate change. So I felt a little out of my depth because most of the data sets I'd been familiar with were qualitative surveys and things like Likert scales and just different data sets essentially. So when I started the summer school, I had no idea what a raster or a vector, I had no idea what those meant. I was kind of leaning heavily on my teammates to kind of carry us through that part of the project, but the projects were twofold. So we were trying to find solutions. We were trying to use Copernicus satellite data, but we were also trying to provide business solutions. So for me, I was quite familiar with the business side of the project, and I was very much taking the lead on that for my team, working with people and doing the business side. But I definitely was very happy to have help from other sectors. I was very happy to have team members from different sectors help with the other side of the project, which was more related to space data because I was the one that was more comfortable with consumer behavior.
So it seems like it was really it was quite multidisciplinary to a degree. And then, yeah, you seem to add a very different element to these working groups, I suppose. Was there any challenges to working with these different groups of people? Or, I don't know, as you say, it sounded like it was quite a good meld of the business side and the customer facing kind of side coming from you and idea generation of the pitching. And then kind of the technical side of kind of geography people, the science people sort of thing? Did it meld well, or were there some, I don't know, pinch points?
I think it did meld well, and I think it was a very important exercise, especially for the people, well, for me as well, because I didn't know much about the products that we were dealing with. But for those who were coming from more engineering backgrounds, I thought it was very interesting, because in the end it did work very well. But of course, there was a lot of trial and error and a lot of tensions that build up, because you're like 50 participants all stuck together for 8-9 hours a day for 5 weeks. So of course there will be tensions, and they come and they go. But I thought one of the interesting things for me, coming from a more social science background, was there was all of these brilliant ideas. Like, all the engineers and all of the environmental scientists had all these wonderful ideas, but it was very hard to narrow it down into a feasible product that could be consumed by a consumer, essentially. So I think that was probably the trickiest part, was taking these grand ideas and these great technological innovations and sources of data and finding a way that was actually palpable for a consumer palate.
So the process was a 5-week process where you went to lots of different places around Europe, research institutes and industry kind of heads, kind of just learning from their industry and kind of trying to incorporate that into your idea. How useful was this? Like, did you have, like, when it comes to the idea generation, did you have something kind of instantly and you kind of just worked on that, and kind of like visiting the other places was, I don't know, just reinforcing your idea? Or did you have, like, I don't know, was it a totally blank slate for like a week or two, and then by visiting these sort of institutes, did it just sort of build upon kind of layers and layers, so you kind of developed your idea that way? Like, and yeah, could you describe what your idea was?
Yeah, so I think it was probably different for different summer schools, but for this particular one, we started, the first 2 weeks were in Bologna, and we did a lot of field trips. We met with a lot of different people from the European Space Agency. We went to a data server connection site. Oh gosh, it's been a few years, but we did do a lot of different workshops that were quite inspirational. And in those first 2 weeks, that was us trying to make our groups and to come up with a topic and, you know, settle on themes. So there was a variety of different groups, but my group, we kind of gravitated more towards agriculture, and we knew we wanted to do something with satellite data that could further the agenda for adoption.
Sorry, you've just cut out a little bit then again. I think it was just after you were talking about using agriculture and satellites.
Yeah, so that was the theme of my team. And so the first 2 weeks, we were individually trying to figure out what we wanted. And by the end of those first 2 weeks, me and 4 other people, we gravitated together and we decided that that was the project we would focus on. Mm-hmm. So the next 2 weeks of the course, we were in Lund, Sweden. And that phase, we didn't do as many field trips. We did do one field trip to Copenhagen, which was quite insightful because of the thing. But for the most part, we had people come to the university that we were staying at and give us more background information on data, and also just general ways to tailor our projects. So I thought that was quite helpful. And the last week we were in Leiden in the Netherlands, and that week was completely dedicated to refining our report and focusing on our pitch.
What was the pitching process like? Was it a bit nerve-wracking? Like, I suppose you've come from a bit more of a business background, so perhaps business pitching might be something that came to you a little bit more naturally, perhaps, than to like other participants in your team, I suppose. Or, I don't know, was this something totally different?
I found it quite nerve-wracking, but that was mostly because it felt like everything sped up at the end of the last week. So we had we'd all taken on this big chunk of research, and it just felt like a big project that we had. And even though we've been giving all of our time to it, it did feel quite daunting to suddenly have to put everything together and make it seem professional within a week.
Yeah.
So it was stressful, but I would say it was very much worth it. And all the teams pulled together and we managed to put on quite a nice conference style presentation event at the end.
I imagine, yeah, at the beginning, 5 weeks probably seems very far away, but then you're slowly doing, like, you're ticking things off your to-do list, and yeah, you're at the end and just sort of like, I imagine, even in the best intentions, you're probably still kind of rushing around at the end, just trying to cross T's and dot I's.
Yeah, that was definitely the case.
Yeah. 5 weeks is quite a long time, but like, it must have been like a real, like thrown in at the deep end with a lot of different people with a lot of different backgrounds. But it would have been, I imagine, it seems like a really great experience. Do you stay in touch with any of the people you've met on the course, or are you still kind of working with them with ideas? Or yeah, it was just must have been like great for just networking.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I've been in touch on and off with some people, but I'm actually living with someone that I met at this summer school right now.
Really?
Yeah, so she's one person that I stayed in touch with like more regularly than others, and it happened she was in London, so yeah, we live together now. But I definitely would say one of the most unique and exceptional aspects of that course was the networking aspect, because you have so many people in so many different disciplines that you would have otherwise not known. At least for me, I don't have many connections with engineering school for my master's, so to have connections to engineers who are also like-minded and interested in climate science and climate change was very useful for me.
Yeah. And yeah, just must seem like a lifetime ago now, doing something kind of with people, with a lot of traveling. And yeah, it might be a bit of a time, might be a little time in the future when something like this happens again. Do you think this could work online, or do you think it's kind of like, it's a format that you really need to be in the same room with people?
I think it would be a completely different experience if you did it online. Mm-hmm. And one of the most rewarding aspects of it was being able to talk with people. And I have a lot of memories from the course, but one of the most vivid memories is me and my team just sitting hours on end in a room together, doing our own individual research tasks, but always bouncing ideas off of each other. So if you run into an issue, you could just say, hey, does anyone know this? And then them being able to answer immediately in the room. And I don't know, I felt like that was very productive and useful for my team dynamic, at least. And I can't really imagine having to do that without kind of physical proximity to the people I'm working with.
No, sure. That does make, like, you can get instant feedback of ideas. And as you say, bouncing, like, you can kind of refine an idea. It might not be very good to begin with, but after a few more people have kind of contributed to it, it just sort of like, yeah, a bit more of a community sense of spirit, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it seems that the summer school seemed to have quite a big effect on you. Like, you've kind of, you're now studying an MA in GIS and which is I've got it written down here, geospatial sciences. And that's kind of like, you, again, using satellites to create maps and using that data to solve problems, I suppose. Did you expect it to sort of like drive your career kind of direction in such a big way when you kind of, like when you've signed up, or I don't know, were you expecting kind of like this culture change?
Yeah, I completely didn't expect it. And like I said, when I first heard that I was put in the InnoSpace summer school, I was quite intimidated, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to get through the 5 weeks. And then at the end of the 5 weeks, it all seemed less daunting. Mm-hmm. And I decided that I wanted to do my dissertation for my MA in psychology and business. I wanted to use satellite data. And I did that mostly because I found it quite frustrating in the discipline that I'd chosen. Don't get me wrong, like psychology and business, there's lots of great metrics and methodologies for quantifying things. But I was just kind of frustrated because it felt like they were very outdated and we had all this new technology available. So I went ahead and decided to try and use new technology and new data sources. And after doing that project for my master thesis, I realized I actually really enjoyed it. And even though I taught myself, I realized that there was just so much more that I could learn. So that really did motivate me to want to do more with geospatial sciences, especially with GIS. And I completely didn't think I would ever be that person. And it still feels weird to be doing an engineering degree, but I really do love it. It's been a huge change for me.
What was the best thing you got from the experience, do you think? Like, you've talked about the networking a little bit, and you've talked about the use of sort of the new sorts of data, but if someone was thinking about doing a similar sort of summer school, what would you say to them was the best thing you got from it?
Yeah. I think for me, the best thing I got out of that was definitely meeting new people from different sectors, because I do find when you are on a university track, you tend to only really surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing as you and are probably like-minded. So for me, one of the biggest things I got out of it was definitely meeting new people from different industries. And yeah, if I were to give advice to people going into a summer school, I would definitely say, enjoy the process, let it be what it is, but really do focus more on just meeting new people and opening your horizons and trying to just broaden your perspective, because you never know what could happen and like you never know what other people can bring to your own perspective.
Do you think that kind of coming from like a less sort of like, as you said before, there was lots of geography people, lots of people who've done physics and sciences. Do you think it gave you an advantage kind of coming from a different background and seeing kind of some of this in a different way and just sort of like piecing the puzzle together slightly differently? Do you think that's been an advantage to you now moving into your MA and your further studies?
Yeah, I do think it's given me a different perspective on certain things. So a lot of people in my current masters, they're very interested in infrastructure and engineering and kind of like transportation and things like that, which is all fun and great. But for me, I'm quite interested in modeling complex behavior. Mm-hmm. So that does kind of set me apart from other people on my course, because a lot of people are focusing more on infrastructure and urban planning and things like that, which definitely has a place and is very important. But I do think because I have a different background, it gives me more flexibility and more insight to actually bring the two disciplines together.
So you are studying part-time your master's with GIS. What else are you doing at the moment? Have you been able to continue using the skills you've developed from the summer school in other parts of your life?
Yeah, so I've been studying part-time, and I've also been working part-time. So with COVID, it's been a bit of a journey, but I was working part-time for a data company as a research assistant. But recently I've gotten a full-time position at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So I'll be working as a full-time research assistant there for their IMANA projects, which is the innovative metrics and methodologies for nutrition and agriculture action.
Oh, so wow,
I'm working on developing new methodologies to quantify agriculture and to better reinforce food systems to better inform policymakers. So that's very exciting.
So definitely using like the agriculture side that you were developing during your time in the summer school. So yeah, that must be very rewarding.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I don't know. Have you got any more ideas? Would you do another sort of pitch? Do you have like a business? Any ideas for potential businesses using this, or are you going to just, I don't know, step away from that for the time being and just? You sound pretty busy already, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. So I do eventually want to get back into the business side, but that's an eventual thing. So for me right now, where I'm at career-wise, I'm really focusing on honing my skills and getting more perspective. So that was one thing Climate KIC definitely showed me was very useful, was just broadening my perspective and like being open-minded to things. So I'm still kind of in that stage, because that I think is something very important when you go on to business ventures and doing business solutions, is if you want to solve an issue, you first have to know what the problems are. And you can't know what the problems are until you have experience actually confronting those problems and like encountering them in the field. So that's what I'm focusing on right now. I do know I'm very interested in food security and agriculture, and I think GIS and satellite data has a big role to play in this sector, but I'm not entirely sure what the most valuable way of addressing these issues are. I'm still kind of unclear of what issues still need to be addressed, because there's so many issues. I just haven't picked one that I'm particularly interested in, but I do think eventually I would like to do more business, just not at this time.
I suppose really having kind of like the science kind of and kind of the theory behind kind of these issues, it's all well and good, but without kind of like the practical kind of tangibility that sort of having business kind of experience, like having that experience, it's sort of both sides of the coin, I suppose. Like you've got the theory, and then the go get like the ability to actually make that theory into something more tangible than just information that's in your head, I suppose. That must be a really rewarding sort of idea, just sort of like problem, solution, work, new problems, new solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the idea.
That's all my questions. So thank you very much for joining us today, Claudia. And yes, good luck with the new job. And yes, I hope you don't, find some time for yourself in between that and your studies.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.